Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, in which we bring you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics that we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we'll be discussing how yoga is being weaponised against Sikhs. Yes, you heard that right. More Sikh issues hit the mainstream, and we've got coverage of a little unfortunate hostility during Air India commemorations in Vancouver. Joining me for Perspective, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. I hope life is treating you well on that side of the pond. And once again, thank you to all of the viewers who are joining us today.
And as always, together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. As usual, we'll take a look at your great comments that you've sent us, and of course we'll be continuing our day-to-day look back 40 years ago of those events in 1984, so stay tuned for that. So sit back, relax, and to kick us off, as always, James, what have you got for us today?
Well, I'm going to take you back once again to the Air India Memorial in Vancouver, British Columbia, that took place on the 23rd, of course, marking the 39th anniversary of the horrific events. With that said, there were pro-Khalistan supporters in attendance, and I'm going to bring up a video here where at the end it did get a little heated between a small group of people. I must say that the Vancouver Police Department was on standby, and not only were they visibly present during the event, but they also were in fatigues and throughout the park and just keeping a really low profile, but they did have a strong presence just to make sure that everybody was safe.
उसके बाद में एक मुसलमान था, मुसलमान कुछ लड़के थे, वो उसको मेरे फादर साहब को लेकर वहाँ अपने घर में गए। मुसलमान right in front of the good luck. We are Canadians. We are here. So you got to do whatever you want. We are here to play homage. So we heard you. We heard what you just said. I lost my uncle. I lost my uncle. That's why I'm here. I'm not from Khalistan.
So, of course, both sides, with myself being there at the event, I felt that they were really united in the fact that they would like to see an open investigation happen again of the Air India events, and also the release of more information on the actual events and those responsible that took part in that. It was really a shared experience of people sharing grief, of people really honoring the lost souls, and to remember the events of 1985. So again, it really was a shared experience, but some people just took exception to the flags being there. I think that there was just a bit of misunderstanding as to the goals, which everybody seemed, in my opinion, to be there for the right reasons, and that was honoring the victims of the Air India flight. The next video is a young lady that was at the event, and she was kind of verbally attacked by one of the individuals and brought her to tears. This is afterwards in her response, which I thought carried a powerful message of hope, of peace, and of compassion for each other. So I just wanted to play that for you as well.
I see you as my sister, and they're standing there yelling at me, and it just shows how far the Indian state has gone to put this divide between us, and that's I repeatedly heard that this is the Indian state's propaganda, that they put us so apart from each other. They showed us even back in 1984 that these people are terrorists, these people are extremists, that's what we felt like today, that we are such horrible people, but we're not. We're not. And to that sister that was yelling there at me, I hope one day you'll understand what the Indian state has done to your people, not just to the one person you lost, but to your Sikh identity, to back home, to your Punjab, to your land, and I hope you realize someday what the Indian state has done, not to just one person, but to our whole community. And the day you realize that, I hope you remember my face. And you remember why we were here with our Khalistan flags? Because we want our land, we want Punjab to be safe, we want our people to be safe. And we don't want another Niger uncle to leave us. We don't want another family to suffer at the hands of the Indian state just because he talks for truth and for religion and for truth. Like, we all know already how great of a man he was. So we were not here to cause any scene. We quietly stood there, we quietly watched them until they told us that we were the wrong ones to come here with Khalistani flags. That's our identity. We came here to show them that we Khalistani stand with you. That we Khalistanis also demand the same justice you are all waiting for, because we believe that justice should always be served to those who are waiting for it. And we were there, standing there, hoping that even you guys all get justice, because you are brothers and sisters. Sikh always teaches that we're all one, that we're all brothers and sisters. And that's how I saw that sister that was yelling at me today, that it's okay, today you don't understand, but one day you will understand.
So I think that was very powerful. You can see the tears dripping off of her chin there. She was just very emotional. She felt it as a personal connection. And I hope that this can show that in today's world, that the sins of the father don't necessarily need to be the sins of the son, in that we can bring together more unity, that we can find truth, acceptance, and the freedom to live in a shared world without violence and hatred. And I think that she really delivered a powerful message there. Again, the Vancouver police, they were heavy in presence, but mostly out of sight, so they handled it well. I think that this young lady was very powerful in her words, but also how she handled herself. And with that, Angus, I'm going to send that back to you.
Yeah, I think emotions clearly running very high, and it's totally understandable. It was a terrible event. A lot of people's families were deeply impacted by that tragedy. And emotions run deep on both sides, because, of course, the Sikh community were blamed for this outrage, which, of course, they're standing up and say it was not us. And this is the sense of injustice that the Sikh community are feeling about this, because many people have pointed out all sorts of uncovering all sorts of evidence that points to the fact that it probably was a false flag outrage created by the Indian intelligence at the time, who were desperate to label Khalistanis as terrorists. So yeah, it's understandable the deep emotions on both sides, and unfortunately this was just an outpouring of those emotions, and they clashed in this situation. But yes, full credit to that lady for handling it so well, and for the community as well for handling it so well. But yeah, that remains an open wound. Let's hope one day it can be healed with full closure. So, okay, let's move on to my first story. This is an interesting one, and I wanted to highlight this story, and I have to thank Lovepreet Kaur, one of our correspondents, for bringing this story to our attention. It's a strange one. Yoga, of all things, that most peaceful practice, has been weaponised, of all things, against the Sikh community. And it's important to raise this issue because it seems almost frivolous, but it actually points to how deep the layers of intimidation and oppression and manipulation go against the Sikh community in India. And this is a story, and I want to preface this story with something else that was reported just a couple of days ago in the AFP news agency. The National Yoga Day was a big day in India just a few days ago. And AFP reported that stretching, arching his back and kneeling on a mat, India's Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi led hundreds of people performing yoga in the Muslim-majority region of Kashmir on Friday. The exercises in Srinagar, capital of the Indian administered part of the disputed territory, marked the 10th International Yoga Day, Modi's own brainchild. But while yoga is not itself a religious practice, it has its origins in Hindu philosophy. The god Shiva is said to have been the first yogi, and many residents of Kashmir are indifferent to the discipline. So we have here Narendra Modi, the arch extreme nationalist, the Hindutva nationalist Prime Minister, going into, very provocatively, into a Muslim majority state of Kashmir, which already is suffering under the cosh of Indian administration, and has so much controversy attached to the area, so many unhappy people who've been oppressed into silence by the Indian state, and pouring in, I think it was 500,000 Indian troops to try and keep a lid on this on this unhappiness amongst the Muslim community. In comes Narendra Modi and practices his discipline of yoga, which of course is attached to the Hindu religion. I mean, it's so provocative. So the story then that I wanted to report today, it was an influencer of all people, a Hindutva influencer, went and practiced her yoga in, of all places, in the Golden Temple, Harmandir Sahib, or the Darbar Sahib. And this story is reported, and let me just share this story with you. This is just one of the reports that has been shared. Around the news agencies. And this says the SGPC, the SGPC, as most people will know, of course, is the committee that administers all Gurdwaras around the state of Punjab. And they say Secretary General Gurcharan Singh Grewal on Monday asked woman Instagram influencer to join police investigation and lodge a complaint against those who are giving her death and rape threats. The local police have registered a first information report, an FIR, against Gujarat-based fashion designer and influencer Archana Makwana for allegedly hurting the religious sentiments of Sikhs by performing yoga on the bank of Saravar at the Golden Temple. The incident sparked outrage amongst the Sikh community, terming it a violation of Maryada of the Darbar Sahib. She's alleged that she's been facing a threat to life after the incident, Grewal said. The Sikh religion always respects women. Sikhs do not engage in such behaviour, do not threaten anyone. He said her assertions are being done solely to defame the Sikhs. The incident resulted in the suspension of 2 SGPC employees for duty dereliction in the Darbar Sahib Parikrama by allowing the woman to do yoga exercises on the morning of June the 21st. And SGPC's president Harjinder Singh Dhami said some people deliberately ignore the sanctity of the holy place, and he said Sikh sentiments have been hurt by the act of the woman. And pictures of the Instagram influencer while performing the yoga went viral. And amidst the uproar, she issued a public apology. She said, "I was unaware that practicing yoga on the Gurdwara Sahib premises could be offensive to some, as I was just paying respect and did not mean harm to anyone. Please accept my sincere apologies." Now, it looks, reading between the lines in this story, this influencer has practiced her yoga in a very provocative place, in a very sacred place of Sikhs. And to give her the benefit of the doubt, she might not have realised the impact of what she was doing. It's very clear that she may have done this perfectly innocently, but it has upset an awful lot of people. But the angle to this story that is actually takes it beyond just a simple, maybe a mistake on her part, is the fact how it's being spun by the state. Now, of course, complaints have been made against this lady and she's facing an FIR by the police. But now the state are claiming, and social media, the Hindutva army on social media, are now saying that she's receiving rape and death threats for the Sikh community, which is apparently totally untrue. The SGPC has denied this. They say our religion, our community respect women in all situations. There is no way that she would have received death and rape threats of all things. So again, this just demonstrates this just very low level of oppression of the community, where even just a simple, silly story like this has been spun into now making the Sikh community the instigator of death and rape threats against this obviously very high-profile influencer. So, James, it just shows how difficult it is for the community, particularly on social media, to even fight back against just simple stories like this, where they have been offended and suddenly they become the instigators of all this situation.
And it just shows that, people can become pariahs just by the sense of some idiot that feels like they are the master of the keyboard, hiding in a dark room somewhere and trying to put opinions out and claiming to be on behalf of a certain group of society, and how much damage that can cause.
Yeah, it's quite upsetting to see this. As I say, it's just very low level, but it's very indicative, very demonstrative of the bigger picture of what's going on. And then my second story, just a quick one. We've talked a lot about, particularly recently, about how Sikh issues are hitting the mainstream. And we're finding more and more mainstream media, particularly Western media, are now covering issues that previously would have never even made the small print in the back pages. And I wanted to highlight this article, and I won't go into details because it does actually repeat a lot of many things that we've talked about and that many other outlets, news outlets, have covered. And by that I include Sky News recently during the marches commemorating 1984, and about the ABC documentaries that have been released on YouTube that we talked about in yesterday's show. But this is The Economist, and this is a very widely circulated publication that circulates around the Western English-speaking world. And it tends to focus primarily, obviously, on economic issues and big news stories that affect the West. But they, in their magazine, have printed this really interesting story headlined, "Canadian Sikhs thought they were safe to protest against India, then one of them was gunned down. Sikhs campaigning for an independent state believe they are in Indian government sights." So their investigative team at The Economist have interviewed a lot of Sikhs within the diaspora in Canada, and they've asked all the questions, as ABC did as well. And they've reported exactly the same issues. This underlying threat from India, this transnational repression, and how many of these Canadian Sikhs have been given these threat to life warnings by law enforcement to say that their lives are under threat from operatives unknown, or they're at least by law they're not allowed to reveal who these threats are coming from. But of course everybody knows where they are coming from. Of course they're coming from the Indian assassination squads operating in the Americas and across the diaspora. But it's very interesting that this, again, a mainstream publication, The Economist, which usually wouldn't touch stories like this, has now got a huge article. This lady, Annie Hilton, has written this very interesting, huge article, again, about all these main issues about India transnational repression against the large Sikh community in Canada, James. It's great to see, isn't it?
It is, and the more, again, it's a part of our goal with this show as well, is to raise awareness, to educate the English-speaking world about the customs, about the challenges, about the history. I mean, you know, it's great to see that we're not the only ones that are taking a step forward to speak about these issues in the mainstream media.
Yeah, so it's great to see the profile of the community getting more and more airtime and publication time. Okay, let's rattle on to our comments section. And as always, we have received loads of wonderful comments. Thank you, as always, for your great comments. We get very complimentary comments, which we do appreciate. Those comments really do help us to continue. Now, I wanted to just pick out a couple of comments, or 2 or 3 comments on this story. This was an interview that we did last week with Deit Singh, a very interesting gentleman who has done a huge amount of research into the background and the lead up to 1984. And I do urge our audience to please watch that interview. It's shocking how many years this attack was planned in advance. I am talking literally years. This wasn't just a quick thing that Indira Gandhi put together. Operation Blue Star was planned years in advance. And it wasn't just an attack on the Ahmadiyya Sahib. It was part of a huge campaign to attack the Sikh nation, effectively. So do watch that interview. It's very revealing. And we had some great comments after that interview. Here's one from Harpreet Baines. This is exactly what Modi's doing again, moving everyone in the police around. So moving Punjabi services out of Punjab and moving others from out of Punjab in. They've already brought in teachers from out of the Punjab who don't even know the Punjabi alphabet, so they can wipe out Punjabi language and culture. This references something that we did talk about in that interview, in which army officers in the Indian Army were deliberately promoted and demoted depending on their loyalty or their potential backlash if 1984 Operation Blue Star went ahead. So the Indian government deliberately moved potentially sympathetic officers, military officers, out of the way to stop them interfering in Operation Blue Star. And likewise, this happened in Punjab recently, where the state is deliberately moving in teachers into schools. And we talked a lot about the indoctrination of Punjabi youth. The Sikh community youth, the young, are being indoctrinated again by Hindutva ideology in schools, where they have no choice but to soak up this indoctrination, this propaganda, this Hindu propaganda, which is turning them away from their heritage, their own culture. And this has been done very deliberately by moving in into Punjab these teachers from out of the state who don't even speak Punjabi. And we know, for example, that it is children are not even allowed to speak their own native language, their indigenous language, in their own schools. They have to speak other language, Hindi. which is very sad to see. We also talked a lot about Bhindranvali, and the same comment says they use Bhindranvali as a figure to blame and attack. Firstly, they falsely vilified him. Everyone who met him loved and respected him from all religions. He wasn't just a Sikh figurehead, he was a figurehead in the whole region because he represented so many people, not just Sikhs, because he was only asking for basic human rights. He wasn't asking for Khalistan, ironically, he was only asking for basic human rights. And the follow-up comment here from Cruella Indrodeville, if you excuse my pronunciation, it was equal rights for everyone. It wasn't just Sanji asking rights for himself. I met people of all classes that loved him. Only people that don't like him are from families that were involved in killing of Sikhs. So yeah, again, this supports that very same comment, that it was everybody loved him. He was a figurehead for so many people, not just the Sikhs. And then we had another comment from Kuldeep Kaur. We're slaves, so no media for us in India, no freedom of speech and religion. Thanks to you, Satlaj. Well, thank you. That is why we exist, isn't it, James? We're here to try and get the message out of the Sikh community who find themselves silenced by Indian media, particularly.
Absolutely, and the viewers can help us in that by sharing our videos, sharing the program, and just widening the exposure that we have so we can reach more people.
Good point. Please get the word out that we exist, and we are doing our best to get the message out. I did an interview also last week with Deit Singh, a very interesting gentleman. He's a British Sikh and a very respected Khalistani campaigner, a very respected British civil servant. And there's a long comment here, and I won't go into too much detail about this, but Harjinder Baraj commented about, this is the end of the Sikh Empire. This is Queen Victoria and the British Empire, the British state, British establishment. The final Maharaja, Deit Singh, he was a young boy, and they brought him back to the UK, and they offered him a stipend. They offered him salary, basically, from the British government, saying, right, you keep quiet, you don't fight, you don't claim to be the next Maharaja and whip up the native Punjabi Sikhs, and we'll pay you a lot of money. And they gave him an estate in East Anglia in the UK, a huge estate. I've driven past it, it's massive. So they bribed him basically as a young boy. They took him away from his mother. He didn't see his mother for many, many years. They brought him to the UK and they indoctrinated him into almost British culture. And it's a very fascinating story. I do urge others who don't know his story to look into it and read about it. But this poor boy, he grew up to be actually a very respected individual, and he sat astride both Great Britain and India, and he did in fact sneak back to India to meet his mother many years later. And this comment, it's worth a read if our audience have time to have a look at this comment, and then do read around this story. But thank you for that comment. It does raise a very interesting story. We might cover that actually one day. I love this comment. Avirdi also said, self-determination is a democratic right. Therefore, let the Sikhs of UK make a Khalistan in the UK. Let the Muslims of UK make an Islamic state in the UK. And I see comments like this about the diaspora, Sikhs in Canada and indeed the UK. Why don't they demand Khalistan in Canada? Yeah, absolutely. It's a very valid point. I will explain, though, why. If they want to, they can. This is how democracy works. If they are enough Khalistanis in the UK, in Canada, they have a democratic right to campaign for that. And we see them in the streets on a regular basis campaigning for it. And under Western democracies, if there is sufficient support across the community, if there is a majority of support across the UK or across Canada, they will be granted that. That's how democracy works. Now, vice versa, let's look at Punjab. Have they been given that right? It's not even legal to campaign for Khalistan, never mind ask for it or campaign for it or even ask for a referendum. So it's double standards, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's a valid point, but what we're trying to portray to our audience and critics like this who say this is, yeah, they have that right here in the UK and Canada to ask for that. That's how democracy works. But they don't have that right in India. And that's the whole point. India claims it's democracy, but you're not even allowed to talk about it in the Punjab. And that's part of the reason why Amritpal Singh, amongst many others, resides in jail without charge, because he dared to demand that we should have our own state. We should have self-determination. That's not democracy. James, I'm sure you got opinions on that one.
I would definitely encourage people to learn more about the Sikh culture and the history going back to the 1800s and even earlier. But then coming up to the partition of 1947 and understanding how the unfairness of the way the partition was enacted through Britain and forming Pakistan and India, while just totally ignoring the history and the autonomy of the Sikhs.
Yeah, and that actually refers back also to that first comment of Harjinder's, where he mentions that history could have turned out very differently during partition. It could well have been, instead of between Pakistan and India, the Muslims of Pakistan and India, it could have been between the Sikhs and Pakistan, or the Sikhs and India. If the British had respected their word that they had given to the Sikhs, things could have been very different. So the British have a lot to answer for. Final comment, we need more English programmes, maybe with women as well. Well, we'd love to bring you more English programmes, but we need more people. But actually, it's interesting, we need more women as well. I totally agree. And maybe if there are women in our audience, ladies in our audience, who would like to contribute, please do contribute. Why not send us some videos? If you have some opinions, if you have strong opinions, send us a video. We'll give you our email address at the end. Send us a short video, 30-second, 1-minute video. We'll be happy to air it. So we do invite the ladies in our audience. We'd be more than happy to give them a higher profile. So please do contribute. We will be very happy to give that airtime. James, I'm sure you agree with that.
I completely agree. There's so much power in representation of everyone, and that includes the women. We want to hear from you, so speak up, and we want to share your voice.
Absolutely. Okay, and we move into our final segment, that, of course, of our historical segment, looking back at the events of 1984. And as always, we will credit National Sikh Youth Federation for their narrative, which we've paraphrased for. This is the final day of their 10 days of terror, as they call it. This is the 10th of June, when things now start settling down, but the aftermath, of course, the dreadful aftermath, really kicks off. So I'll read you a summary of what happened on June the 10th and a few days beyond. So on June the 10th, 1984, the brutal siege of the Golden Temple concluded after 10 days of dreadful bloodshed. Sikh militants who'd occupied the holy site since the 1st of June were finally defeated by the Indian Army in an unprecedented military operation. The use of heavy artillery and overwhelming firepower against its own citizens marked a dark stain on Indian history. The government's initial claims of a swift victory were shattered by the protracted battle. General Bra's boast of a 2-hour operation exposed a miscalculation of the resistance. The extended fighting also thwarted plans for a media blackout, leading to a global outcry from Sikhs who learned of the violence, not just Sikhs as well, global media. In the aftermath, the government embarked on a huge campaign of disinformation to legitimise its actions. One fabricated narrative portrayed the Sikh fighters as highly trained terrorists, equipped with sophisticated weaponry supplied by Pakistan. However, this claim was met with scepticism. The British Daily Telegraph pointed out the government's attempt to exploit tensions with Pakistan for political gain, questioning the legitimacy of the foreign involvement narrative. Military personnel further challenged the government's claims, with estimates suggesting a much smaller force of poorly armed militants. The contrasting media reports exposed the government's manipulation of information. The Telegraph, again in London, described the Akal Takht, a revered Sikh shrine, as looking like a bombed-out building reminiscent of the Second World War, whilst the Times of India presented a sanitised version, blaming the destruction of the Akal Takht on the militants themselves. This blatant censorship extended to journalists and human rights groups who dared to challenge the official narrative. Citizens for Democracy's report on human rights abuses in Punjab was banned and its authors arrested on charges of sedition. Brahma Chelani, the only foreign correspondent who managed to remain in Amritsar during the attack, faced similar charges for reporting on the alleged execution of Sikh pilgrims. The Battle of Amritsar and its aftermath exposed deep rifts within India. The government's heavy-handed tactics and blatant manipulation of information left a lasting scar on Sikh-India relations. This dark episode serves as a reminder of the dangers of resorting to extreme violence and the importance of upholding truth and accountability in times of crisis. James. It's that brings to an end a terrible, terrible stain of it in India's history.
It does, and it's generational, so it still has resonation and impacts today. And for all of those, of course, on behalf of Angus and myself, we send our thoughts and our prayers. And we hope that people have learned something from the coverage that you've brought in this light over the past week and a half, or several weeks.
Indeed. And that brings to an end our annual coverage of 1984. But I do refer our audience on our channel. We have 4 very detailed programmes. There's over an hour of coverage of the detailed events of 1984. It's an incredible story of the deepest heroism of Bhindranwale and his small band of people just simply fighting for their basic rights, and the aftermath of 1984, the genocides that followed, and as we've said many times, it's a shocking story. Those details need to be preserved and brought out on a regular basis to remind the world of what happened. So there you have it. That was Perspectives, and please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. We do appreciate them. We do read each and every one of them. And of course, you can message us directly at message@satellitetv.com on any news items that you'd like to highlight that we might have missed. And of course, referring to what we said earlier, if any ladies would like to contribute, please let us know. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching Perspectives. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Signing off from Canada, wishing everybody peace, happiness, and be safe out there.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.